All right, good morning. We're going to go over some different types of wire that we stock. All of this is rolled wire, which we've got T-post and things like that as well for the fencing needs, wood post. We won't get to all that today. So we're going to just do the FAQs on the stuff that you guys hopefully get hit with a lot. Um, and I'll try to keep it pretty baseline because there's a lot in this world and there's a lot that we don't even carry. So we'll just stick to what we've got and those frequently asked questions. So first I'm going to go over gauge, right? There's a lot of questions surrounding gauge of wire. So you've got 9 gauge, you've got 11, you've got 12 and a half. When you get into some of the other wires, you get into like a 15 and a half. When you get into the poultry netting, when you hardware cloth, you can creep up in there into like a 19 gauge. So there's a big variance. And the easiest way to remember it is the lower the number, the thicker the wire. The higher the number, the thinner the wire. So a 19 or a 20 or a 25 or whatever that is, you're going to be talking about a hardware cloth or a poultry netting or something light, pliable that you can work with. When you're talking a 11 and a half or a 12 gauge or even a 14 gauge, it's going to be more stern product. 14 gauge, these are 12 and a half. You can tell the difference even between just a couple numbers. You get pretty thick quick. So that's the difference between the gauges of wires. Lower the number, thicker the wire, heavier. Higher the number, lighter, more pliable, easier to work with on that. Zinc coating. Zinc coating would be the next thing we talk about. Everything that we carry, there might be like one item, but for the most part, everything that we carry is a class 1 zinc coating. On a class 1 zinc coating, that's like, don't hold me to this, I think it's 0.28 on the zinc coating, and that is on the end of your wire. When they coat that with zinc, it's going to be what is completely coated around the wire all the way around, and that's what protects the wire to keep it from rusting. Okay, so the zinc coating is standard for class 1 is 0.28, so just over a quarter. On a class 3, which we don't hardly carry any, if any, anymore, a class 3 is like 0.8, I think. It's like 3 times the amount of coating on that wire compared to a class 1. So zinc coating is supposed to last, I think, anywhere between 5 and 10 years before it starts to fade off and you get down to the wire. So it kind of gives you that kind of insurance buffer for 5 or 10 years. On a class 3, it's going to be 10 plus years. But as you can imagine, when you coat it at 3 times the price or 3 times the volume of zinc, what's going to happen? Your price is going to just go up. So one reason why we don't carry it is because of price, and the second reason why is because there's not a high demand here, because 90% of our fence is going up for cattle, sheep, and goat. People don't care about the zinc coating in the end. Most of our end users are more cost conscious than that. So gauge, zinc coating. You won't get a ton of questions on zinc coating because we carry a class 1 pretty much across the board. So, but it's good to know what it is. Fence knots, right? So fence knots are just a way that they are tying the fence together, whether that's tying the fence together from a vertical line to the horizontal line, or how you're connecting the fences together when you get to the end of the run, right? So there's lots of ways to skin this cat. We carry several options. I say several, 3 or 4 probably options in a fence knot. So you've got S joints, you've got hinge joints, you've got monarch knots, you've got cross locks, there's all kinds of different fence knots out there. They all are designed to do the same thing, and that's tie your fence together. They all serve a different purpose in the end. Some will flex more and then retract better. So if you've got a lot of animal pressure or are in a high snowpack area, they like those type of fences, right? Some of them are more rigid and firm, depending on the lock that they put on them. So they don't give and push more. So there's lots of different knots. We don't get that question a lot as far as what kind of knots do you offer. We have narrowed it down to the fundamentals of what our customers want, which is primarily hinge knots. It's a durable knot that gives and flows. So as those cows and stuff push on it, it will flex out and flex back in some, right? So there's also, which isn't a knot, but you've also got a welded, that you're cheap, as baseline as you can get, just a tack weld to get them all together. Obviously that's not going to do much for you other than at some point pop and break, but that's the cheaper side of that knot. Questions on gauge, zinc coating, knots, anything on that? Okay. Types of wire. The two main types of wire in which we're going to stock is going to be a low carbon steel and a high carbon steel. 90% of what we have on hand is low carbon steel. And up until a few years ago, all we had was low carbon steel, with the exception of one of our barbed wires. Low carbon steel has been a trademark of the Midwest forever. That's what everybody's grandpappies hung. It's just what this area has always been known for, is low carbon steel. There's a push in the last 10 years for a lot of high tensile, high carbon steel in the fencing world. Some of the younger guys coming up feel like it's a superior product. Now, the main difference between a low carbon steel and a high carbon steel is a low carbon steel, it just hasn't been stretched out yet. That's the easiest way to think about it. So it's a low carbon product. It needs to be stretched. So when those guys buy a low carbon product, they're used to yanking and yanking and yanking and pulling all that stretch out of the fence and then hanging it, whether it's barbed wire, rolled fence, whatever it is. They pull all the stretch out of it, get it hung up. On a high tensile fence, you don't have to do that. That's why a lot of these guys don't like to work with it, because it messed up their process of how they hang fence, and then they get to yanking on high tensile fence and it snaps because the stretch has already been pulled out of a high tensile fence. It's just a difference of how you work with it. But you know how humans are. When we're set in our ways, we like our ways. And so that's why the high tensile really hasn't caught on well around here. It's not in my opinion, it's not a superior or inferior product. It's just a different product. You just hang it a little different. High tensile fence break point is a lot higher than low carbon. So that's why a lot of these younger guys that are hanging this high tensile stuff feel like it's a superior product, because the break point on it is significantly higher than a low carbon, and the stretch has already been pulled out. So on a low carbon fence, you hang it, and then 2 or 3 years later, you got to go back and tighten it all up, because you stretched it and stretched it and stretched it, and it looks great. It's nice and tight. You hang it, and then winter hits, and then summer hits, and then winter hits, and summer hits, and you come back, and all of a sudden the fence has started to sag a little bit. So now you got to stretch it back out. High tensile, you don't have to do that. The stretch is gone from day one. So that's why it's getting a little bit of momentum. It's gaining significant momentum in the South, and then like the Pacific Northwest and the West regions. They're running a lot of high tensile fence. The Bible Belt, the Corn Belt of America, the Midwest, we are strong in our ways for good and bad, and we are low carbon fencing people. So nothing wrong with it. It's just difference in how you do it, right? Questions on low carbon, high carbon. That's a little more tricky. We do get asked that a little bit more because we do offer some products in high tensile now. Most of our Beckert wire is high tensile fencing, to whereas our Red brand is low carbon. Our Oklahoma branded stuff is low carbon for the moment, but I'm looking at some options on some of their high carbon content, some of their high tensile. Okay, moving away from these a little bit and getting into your barbed wire. Same thing on that. You've got a high tensile. You've got a low carbon fence. 2-point Red brand, has been our staple, bread and butter forever. They're having some struggles getting product out. Therefore, we brought in Oklahoma's 2-point. It is apples to apples as far as the product goes. So we have a fill-in. It's going to be tough to get some of these guys to buy into that because they're used to that Red brand, but it is an apples to apples. It's manufactured the exact same way, same product, same specs. But you've got a 2-point, you've got a 4-point. That's exactly what it says, right? There's 2 points, there's 4 points. You've got barbless wire, which is just that. It's a smooth barbless wire. Some guys use it for electric fence. Some guys use it for bracing corners and bracing posts. So lots of applications for that. And then you can move into like your smooth wire. We carry a couple different sizes and a couple different wire gauges, right? So we talked about that. So we've got a 9 gauge, we've got a 12.5, right? I started to stock a 12 because I had trouble getting the 12.5, but it's similar. It's right there, right? So you've got it in a 100-pound coil, which is about, depending on the gauge of wires, it's, several thousand feet. On a 10-pound roll, you're talking several hundred feet. But that's what a lot of those guys will use to brace corners, is those smooth wire coils traditionally. So questions, comments, concerns on any of that? Okay. I don't want to go too much further down the rabbit hole just because you start getting very granular once we keep going down this. The main thing to remember is we've got zinc coating, right? Class 1. We've got gauge of wire. We've got types of wire, high tensile, low carbon. We've got barbed wires, rolled goods, fences, right? Different sizes. And then the last piece that I'll throw at you is just what are we talking about as far as the fence makeup? So we've got the gauge, we've got the type. Are they 2x4 squares? Are they field fence, which is graduated, right? So it could start at like a 4-inch, and as you get to the top, it's 6, 7, 8, 9 inches, right? So we have to look at that when we're talking fences too, because they're all slightly different, right? So that's a 2x4 square. So that's going to be a 2x4 by 36-inch 100-foot roll or whatever it is, right? So just walk yourself through that slowly as you're looking at it, and it'll tell you what it is. The field fence is a little more tricky because it doesn't tell you on that, but it's more of a graduated product to where it starts small, goes big, right? That's more for your cattle, horses, things like that. Questions on that? One of our quickest growing lines is that sheep and goat. I brought in a cattle panel. It's not a cattle panel, it's a sheep and goat panel, but it's a panel because that sheep and goat market, for whatever reason, is exploding. And it's not even so much the sheep and goat. Some of the cattle guys are using those products as well. So our sheep and goat is a 4x4 square. So that's another variable yet, and we sell more and more of that every year. So types of fences, gauges, styles. If you got any questions when we're done, holler at me. I'll be glad to go more in depth with you if you want. just ask, and if I don't know the answer, I'll find it for you. Perfect.